Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. We've got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty league, PPR leagues, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Ryan Basulto, and I am glad to be back with you guys. Last time I was on the show, we talked about who should be the undisputed number one fantasy football pick. If you didn't check out that episode, check out to figure out who was number one. Talked about the top 5 NFL players who played in March Madness. That was actually really interesting. Most of them, if not all of them, were actually tight ends. But today's show, we are going to talk about who's your new fantasy quarterback. A lot of free agents have been moving around, specifically quarterbacks, have found some new homes in some pretty interesting areas. So we'll see what their fantasy implications are with that. There's a lot of fantasy implications just with everything else in NFL free agency. It's big, really, really big. These moves are what makes champions. The draft is really what makes champions, but this still makes championship football teams. And on our last segment, if you stick around at the end of the show, we are going to talk about the fantasy what could have beens. All the fantasy people, all like Peyton Manning, could have been on the Niners instead of the Broncos when he left the Indianapolis Colts. They were the two people that were in contention for Peyton Manning. He could have literally just went up and left to the 49ers and had a way completely different career. We are going to talk about that at the last segment. But first, we're going to talk about the Patriots stocks right now. Cuz let's do a little stock check. Let's check the stock market right now. If we're talking about in terms of stocks, the Patriots after Tom Brady left plummeted. It was the Great Depression on them. It was the Great Depression of 2008. Whatever you want to call it. It's like when everyone was all in on GameStop and then GameStop was worth $400. Yeah, the Patriots were worth $400. They're pumping. They're moving money. They're making it all. Tom Brady was making magic. Gronk was making magic. And then Tom Brady was the main hedge fund owner and he pulled out. But I thought that the Patriots were just dead in the water. But I guess they're not, because in free agency as of late, they're just making a lot of moves. It started with Cam Newton. They got Cam Newton. That was a good fit. But let's talk about all the other moves, because they spent $137.5 million in guaranteed money from March 15th to March 16th. So in literally 2 days, they spent $137 million, and not even just off contracts, in guaranteed money. That's money you cannot take back. That is, oh, I got an ACL injury. So you know what that means, right? Oh, yeah, that means that I have to still owe you this guaranteed money. It's one of the biggest things that NFL players want nowadays, because it's for sure money. It's what they could rely on. They don't have to worry about, oh, what if I get hurt? Because football is a very physical and contact sport. So obviously you're going to get hurt more times than not. But the Patriots spent all that money. Their biggest needs were at the tight end position. They needed wide receivers. They only have N'Keal Harry and Julian Edelman, who was hurt for most of the year. So that was just pretty much it. That's all they had, with James White in the backfield. Everyone was getting hurt left and right on them. They had Philip Dorsett. N'Keal Harry still was hurt as well. And they need defensive tackles because they were not stopping the run. Besides their defensive woes, if I have to be frank about it, the Patriots just don't excite me from a fantasy perspective, because they just don't have a lot of for sure pieces that I like in fantasy football. For one, they don't pass the ball well. How are you going to get a good fantasy receiver from them? Or if you're playing a PPR league, your running back's going to get a lot of fantasy value, especially with the Patriots. They don't tell you which running back they're going to start that week or give most of the carries to, so they're very unpredictable. Bill Belichick doesn't care about your fantasy team. That's another big reason. He just wants to win games. But the Patriots were not a pass-friendly team last year. They were 30th in passing yards allowed, allowed 30th in passing yards. They averaged 180 passing yards per game, 30th in interception percentage, 27th in total yards, and 27th in point scores. What about that says Patriots, huh? They literally took a big dip, like I said, with the stocks. And instead of the Patriots, folding, going bankrupt, they just decided, hey, we're going to buy the dip. So during their little quote-unquote dip, because they're 7-9 last year, which is very unpatriot-like, so the Patriots decided, hey, let's do something about it. So the first signing, one of the first signings was Hunter Henry, tight end of the San Diego Chargers, which I talked about on previous episodes, one of the previous two episodes, probably both of them, if I have to be honest with you, that Hunter Henry was going to go to the Patriots, and I still wasn't going to be too excited about it. He's on a 3-year deal, $37.5 million contract. Adam Schefter reported it, as he is one to do. Hunter Henry, and they also added Jonnu Smith, by the way, another great tight end. They gave him a good deal too. They actually made him one of the highest paying tight ends in the NFL. 4 years, $50 million, which is very unpatriot-like. There's a lot of things that the Patriots aren't doing characteristic, like giving these big contracts to players, because they're just not the type to want to pay people. They love playing people. They do not want to pay people. Hunter Henry had 60 catches last year, 613 yards, 4 touchdowns. That ranks like bottom 50 in the NFL. Jonnu Smith had 41 catches, 448 yards, 8 touchdowns. A lot of it was because he was hurt. But this also brings back a point that the Patriots are now going back to the double tight end system that worked for them so well over their Super Bowl runs. If you think about them, you think about Daniel Graham and Benjamin Watson. Those guys were a good 1-2 punch. One was more of a blocker, Benjamin Watson being more of the pass-catching one. But they still had pass-catching abilities, both of them. If we're talking about the best Patriots double tight ends of all time, it was Gronk and Aaron Hernandez. Gronk was the pass-catching tight end, which you know what he does even to this day. If you could get Gronk in fantasy right now, he's outside the top 5 of fantasy tight ends, so you really don't worry about him until the bottom, after at least 11th round in the fantasy draft. But Gronk and Aaron Hernandez, a great model to show that the Patriots double tight end system works. The risk on Hunter Henry, though, is that he hasn't played a whole 16-game season in his first 5 years. So injury woes have stopped Hunter Henry. I talk about that all the time. That is why I never once drafted Hunter Henry. This year, he had one of his better years because he played 13 games out of the year. But Hunter Henry still gets hurt more times than not. He is consistent. He's a good red zone threat. But on the Patriots, you just don't know what they're going to do. They're the king of facilitating out of the NFL. They like to facilitate the ball to whoever the game plan suits that week. It never has to do with, oh, hey, I have a great receiver. Like they usually don't have a great one, but I guess they had Randy Moss at that one point. Then they would feed him. But, I mean, you're still giving it to Wes Welker. You're still giving it to Andre Caldwell. They still spread the ball around. Even when they show it with their running backs all the time. They call it Bill Belichick's. The way he plays his running backs. You don't know if they're starting Sony Michel. You don't know if they're starting Damian Harris. One week they give Damian Harris 18 carries. The next week they give him 10. They're very unreliable on who they consistently give it to. Jonnu Smith, his contract raises some eyebrows just because he is, like I said, giving a very unpatriot-like contract. 4 years, $50 million makes him one of the highest paying tight ends. They don't overpay for tight ends in general. The Patriots just like to get who they get at a nice value and make it work within the system. But Jonnu Smith, they see him more as a all-around tight end. He could block, he could catch, and he could read defenses. That's all shown when he was on the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans were not a pass-first offense. They were a run-first, Derrick Henry's going to get 2,000 yards this season and make your fantasy team win a championship offense. Jonnu Smith helped with that. Even though he was hurt, he was still a great run-blocking tight end and a catch. And he could catch the ball. He makes plays too. He's a good red zone threat. He had 8 touchdowns. The Patriots have had the NFL's lowest pass catching production from tight ends for the past 2 years. That is nothing that the Patriots want to be a part of after just living in the Gronk, just smelling the greatness of the tight end of Gronk because he's probably the best tight end of all time. They do not want to go back to, let's just not have a reliable security blanket for our quarterbacks, let alone Cam Newton. That's the whole point of this. They're trying to get Cam Newton those security blankets. Oh, hey, I know you had a shoulder injury, Cam Newton, and your fantasy production is going to be not too well or too good this year. But if we put you with security blankets like Hunter Henry, I want to keep calling him Hunter Renfrow, Hunter Henry, and Jonnu Smith, you can make those easy stick passes, which are 5 yards, turn around and find the hole in the defense. Jonnu Smith does that a lot. Hunter Henry's going to give you a big target. He's over 6'2". He was Justin Herbert's big target when hitting the end zone. I don't know why he would say he wants to play with the real quarterback and then goes to the Patriots, unless the Patriots told him, hey, we're going to get Trey Lance in the draft. We're going to get, Zach Wilson in the draft. We're going to get one of these premier quarterbacks. So Cam Newton's just going to, be the veteran, help him out a bit, ease him in a bit, and then after that, we're going to get a good quarterback. So I don't get what their whole plan is, but they're basically paying just for the potential of Jonnu Smith. He's a young guy, he's under 25, and he's now being paid one of the highest tight end contracts? Doesn't make sense to me unless Bill Belichick saw something in him like he always does. There's always that infamous, Bill Belichick shot where he skipped one of the draft days just to go see this Buffalo linebacker do a little combine tryout for NFL teams. And he was in the rain. He was looking at him. Bill Belichick likes what he likes. He is not going to settle for less. So that's at least a good thing. He's very decisive, and he's good with most of his decision-making skills. So, in that sense, yeah, you could help give an argument with the Patriots, but I don't think so. If you're thinking about the Patriots defense, they got some help in free agency. They got Matt Judon, linebacker of the Ravens. You don't understand why the Ravens got rid of him. He had 34.5 career sacks. He's a great pass rusher at 50 tackles and 6 sacks last year. 6 sacks in an NFL season, you're not no scrub. And Matt Judon was dealing with some injuries, but if you pair him with Dont'a Hightower, and don't forget, Dont'a Hightower missed all last year. He opted out to play last year. He has 505 career tackles, a couple Super Bowls, 25.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. He is a physical guy. Him and Matt Judon will make that defense a physical linebacking core. It's an attitude type of signing where you want, you need some tough guys in the locker room. That's what you need. You need people to get amped up. It's cold in there. It's really cold in New England. You cannot have anybody that's soft, like baby poop. You just can't have it happen. You just don't understand why the Ravens let him walk. But if Bill Belichick got Matt Judon at a hefty price too, 4 years, $56 million, according to Ian Rappaport, the other guy who always leaks the sources. He went for a 4-year, $56 million contract. But Bill Belichick always knows what he sees. He doesn't play the fool. He saw the dip on his team. He said, I'm buying Matt Judon. I'm buying these tight ends. I'm solving the problems. Like I stated in the beginning, they need a defensive lineman. Matt Judon's a linebacker, but he's a pass rush linebacker, so you could put him on the line as well. So it's not even a big issue. He could still kind of cover, but he's mainly a pass rusher. That's what he is. You got the security blankets for Cam Newton because Cam Newton only gave you 8 touchdowns last year. You can't have that happen again. There's no way you win any type of championship in today's NFL with at least good quarterback play. So, speaking about good quarterback play, they try to help out Cam Newton a little more. They got Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne. Nelson Aguilar, ex-Eagles receiver and Raiders receiver, had 48 catches, 896 yards, and 8 touchdowns last year. He was formidable. He was a good pickup if you really felt the week-to-week basis. He went off on the Jets like I knew he would when I started him off the waiver wire. You started him against terrible pass defense, especially terrible pass defense that let let the top off. Because Nelson Aguilar is the type of guy to just go straight deep. He was the second in the NFL in yards per catch at 18.7. The Patriots paid him 2 years, $26 million. He was one of the first notable receivers off the free agency market. But another question is, they're still, like I said, they're buying the dip, but it's just, why are you spending $26 million on a 2-year contract for Nelson Aguilar, who is kind of good? He's just more of a Deshaun Jackson, but still has drop problems. He's had 24 drops in his career. 5 last year, even on the Raiders. Even when everyone told him, like, you can't catch. You can't catch. And you know what? A big problem with your fantasy production will be drops. And not because you get negative fantasy points. I don't know if they do that in your league. That's a little grimy, a little scummy. But if they don't do that, like they don't do in most leagues, the only thing it leads to is that you get benched or played less because you can't drop the ball. You're a receiver. Your job is to have the best hands on the field. There's even that infamous video coming out where the guy caught the baby from a fiery building in Philadelphia. And they're like, oh, you caught the ball. And they're interviewing him on an actual news interview, a live interview on national television. He's like, yeah, I caught the baby. Not like Aguilar. Like, you're getting that much hate from just people out there. That's a problem. You can't be dropping the ball. New England's going to try to cut that out. And I hope they could cut it out because they shouldn't have a problem with it because Bill Belichick is a guru in his own sense. But the Patriots are paying a hefty price, and I think those 24 drops in his career is a lot of drops. DeAndre Hopkins doesn't even have like more than 2 drops in a year, let alone 5 in a year, which is oh no, that's not that bad of a year. I've had 11 drops in a year. What? Why are we paying you? Why would you get paid $26 million to not be able to catch the ball all the time when that's your job? So then they also got Kendrick Bourne. Because Kendrick Bourne, even though he's another kind of receiver, they signed him to a 3-year, $22 million deal because they're still buying the dip. They're buying their stock crash. Everything crashed after Tom Brady left to Tampa Bay. Their value went straight up the roof. They're going to be a Fortune 500 company pretty soon at the way Tom Brady's bringing their stocks up. But Kendrick Bourne is going to also help Cam Newton because, like I said, Nelson Aguilar can't catch. So he's a week-to-week, I don't know if he's going to be a good option this week on the Patriots. So that's why I don't like just drafting them in general. James White was a good option when Tom Brady was there, and he loved him because James White helped him win a Super Bowl. So obviously Tom Brady's going to love him for the rest of his life because Tom Brady values championships. That's why he takes pay cuts to win all the time. Kendrick Bourne is a great third down threat because he's a good route runner. He had 49 catches for 677 yards, 2 touchdowns. The Pats were 17th in the NFL on third downs, which is the bottom half of the NFL. They bought high on him, but they're going for the third down production value. When Cam Newton says, okay, they're going to guard Hunter Henry first because he's probably the best pass catcher we really have. Then they're going to go to Jonnu Smith because if he catches the ball, he could take it all the way to the house because he has great speed and can also break safeties and linebackers down, so it's hard to cover him. Then we got Nelson Aguilar over here. Can't catch like Aguilar. This guy could barely catch. So how are you going to rely on him on third down, which is the most important down? It's going to set the tone for games. Usually teams that win are teams that have high third down percentage rates because they get it done. They are able to move the chains, which is the name of the game of football. Get the yards, score the touchdown. You could score long balls like the Chiefs all the time, but you're not always blessed to have those, home run hits every single time. You got to do it in soccer terms, tiki-taka. You got to pass, score a goal. AKA, you got to eat up some 3 yards, get 5, then get 6, then get 3, get 1, but then get 6. You got to get those third down conversions. It's all a mental game, and the Patriots have it in Bill Belichick. They just need to keep doing it. That defense got a little better too. They added Jalen Mills. He's wishy-washy just because he's transitioning from corner to safety. He had 59 tackles, 1 forced fumble, interception, and 3 passes defensed for the Eagles last year. The thing Bill Belichick likes the most is that People forget that Jalen Mills made a key stop on Julio Jones in the 2017 divisional round on the road to the Eagles' first and only Super Bowl of all time. I don't like the Eagles, but their first and only Super Bowl of all time. And Jalen Mills will be able to make big plays. If he's able to make big plays, Bill Belichick's like, okay, I can work with the rest. The Patriots defensive backs are getting old. McCourty and Patrick Chung are already 33 years old. These guys are already veterans in the league. So not having a younger guy in the secondary is never good because speed deteriorates the older you get. And the only thing that's a knockoff on Jalen Mills is that he doesn't have top-end speed, so that's why they moved him to safety. You have to have top-end speed as a corner because you're going against the fastest people pretty much in the country, if not the world. Primetime NFL athletes that are based off, and they kind of work their whole ethic around top speed at like a small interval of time because on football, it's not an endurance game. You're not running up and down the field all the time. Yes, on no-huddle offenses, it does get tiring, but it stops after the play's done. You get a chance to regroup, then you get to start the play. Not many sports do that. Soccer, basketball, a lot of times those are just quick pace, unless there's a timeout, not in soccer, but, hockey as well. You have to sub people in the middle of the game, but he doesn't have top-end speed, so you need that top-end speed at being a corner. But he's a 26-year-old who will help that Patriots secondary. I know that he will just because Bill Belichick is a defensive guy. He was a defensive guy when he was on the defensive coordinator for the Super Bowl champion New York Giants with Bill Parcells back in the late 80s, going into the early 90s. They signed him to a 4-year, $24 million deal, Jalen Mills. Once again, buying the dip. I'm all for it. Their defense needs to get better. It was not that good, and they know that they need to get better corners just for the simple fact that Josh Allen's out there and the Bills are out there, and they know that they have to stop them. They also got defensive tackle Daron Goldchocks. I can't really say his name too well. Sorry if I'm bothering it, but the 26-year-old had 16 tackles and 1 safety for the Miami Dolphins last year. And the Patriots were 26 in the NFL, allowing 131.4 yards per game on the ground. So they allowed a lot of rushes. They were also terrible against average yards per rush. They allowed 4.5 yards per rush. That's a lot of yards. You could literally rush on them with those averages all game and get a first down to a touchdown every time. You just need 4 yards to get the first down every down. So he's a big guy. He's going to help them in the middle. The big thing and the big reason why I think they got him was because the Patriots offensive linemen have played against him for 4 years, and they spoke very highly about him on the Dolphins. They know he's good. He tore his bicep, so he only played 5 games last year. That's the only knockoff, but hopefully all those things could help that rush defense, that pass defense. So if you want the Patriots defense, you could rely on them because you know Bill Belichick is a defensive guy. And this all comes back to who is going to help move this Patriots fantasy train. Cam Newton, the ultimate hedge fund owner, just because they need him to produce and get the company money. He had only 2,600 yards, 2,657 yards if you want to be exact, ranked 24th in the NFL, 8 touchdowns, ranked 33rd in the NFL, had a 47 QBR, ranked 30th in the NFL. Those are all the worst things I've ever heard of in my life. He needs to do what he has to do on the Panthers. Only problem is I don't see it happening just because he had those shoulder injuries. How are you going to throw without shoulders? Tell me. Try to throw a football right now. Go outside your yard. No, I dare you. Go outside your yard right now and try to throw a football without shoulders. It's not going to work. His shoulders are shot. He tries to run too much. He gets hurt too often, and it's not going to work out in the end. I don't think this is going to lead to too much. You could play Nelson Aguilar sometimes on a week-to-week basis, depending on the matchup. If they're playing the Jets, probably just start him because the Jets stink, and he went off on them last year when he played with them against the Raiders. But another notable additions that the Patriots got, they got Carl Davis off the Jaguars practice squad. He is a defensive tackle. He'll help that Patriots defensive line. They also got Henry Anderson, 300 pounds, good against the run. He was another defensive tackle that they signed to. So that also will help their 26th ranked rush defense, which is awful, awful, awful. You cannot have that. Bill Belichick was probably just completely appalled with the way his defense played last year compared to how his defenses normally play in the past. They also got Justin Bethel, a 31-year-old special teamer who led the Patriots with 14 solo tackles on special teams. That's a lot of tackles because those are open field tackles, 50 yards to 50 yards from sideline to sideline. For you to get those tackles, you have to be a boss. Him and Matthew Slater are the best 1-2 punch in special teams today, so that will help them with special teams, which could help in fantasy special teams. The best thing I like out of all these things I've said about the Patriots and their free agency stock rise, or if you're not buying the dip, just sell. Just sell and bail out like I would. This could help their fantasy defense the most. So check out on their fantasy defense because Matt Judon and Dante Hightower are nothing to reckon with. They added Jalen Mills in that secondary with already Devin McCourty and Patrick Chung. They should have a better defense next year, especially since they go against the Jets and a young Tua who might not always be there. And his backup might come in, who we're going to talk about in the next segment. We are going to talk about who's your next quarterback. What quarterback went to what NFL team in this free agency in the past couple of days, and what are their fantasy implications on that? And remember, stick around towards the end of the show just so we could talk about the what could have beens in fantasy football history. And we'll be back after the commercial.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We just went over the Patriots' stock market rise, or crash, however you want to see it, in this free agency that they just took over completely. Bill Belichick came out like Stone Cold Steve Austin. The glass broke and he was just ready to pick up all the free agents. But now we are going to talk about who is your new quarterback. A lot of quarterbacks have been shuffled during the free agency. Quarterbacks are very important, as you can tell, because they have a huge factor in fantasy football implications. A lot of these quarterbacks could be sleepers going into next season and waiver wire pickups that you can pick up to win a fantasy football championship. Remember, at the end of the show, stick around so we could go over the biggest fantasy what-ifs. We're going to look at stars that could have went to different teams and what would have happened with their fantasy implications on those teams. Or could they have won you a couple more championships if they played more? Stick around to the end of the show to figure out. But first, we are going to talk about who's your quarterback. First quarterback I want to talk about is Andy Dalton. Just signed a 1-year, $10 million deal with the Chicago Bears? I thought they wanted Russell Wilson. Talk about a what if. They could have got Russell Wilson, or tried to get Russell Wilson reportedly, for 2 unnamed starters, a 3rd-round pick, and 3 first-rounders. Seahawks were not convinced. The Bears were one of the most aggressive suitors for Russell Wilson, but instead, they got themselves the red rifle, Andy Dalton, who we have already talked about past in the show, and I can't believe that the Bears and Ryan Pace are going for this right now. What is going on in your mind? The Bears are not running their organization right as well, just like the Jets and the Texans. They overspent on a high-paying contract for Mike Glennon. That didn't work under Ryan Pace. Then they try to get the most expensive backup in the NFL in Nick Foles. That didn't work out. They drafted Mitchell Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. Talk about what ifs. That didn't work out. And now they're here trying to sign Andy Dalton. And Andy Dalton just came out on the 18th and said that he was told that he's going to be the starter on the Chicago Bears. So it's not like he's coming in there and, okay, he's not going to bring that much fantasy implications. No, these are huge fantasy implications. Do you draft Allen Robinson next year with the red rifle back there? The red rifle has proven that during the regular season, he can put up what he has to put up. He was a stout Bengals quarterback. One of the best ones. Never won a playoff game. That's why he never got the credit that he kind of deserved. But Andy Dalton is not Russell Wilson. They went shopping for Russell Wilson and came back with Andy Dalton, and now the Bears are heated. The best Bears quarterback of all time is Jim McMahon. Who else are you going to say? I guess Jay Cutler, because Jay Cutler was the only quarterback who kind of threw good, but he doesn't have a Super Bowl. He's not decorated like Jim McMahon. No one else in Bears history is a good quarterback. The Bears don't draft good quarterbacks, and it doesn't make sense to me. Speaking about Bears drafted quarterbacks that don't make sense to me, the Bills signed on the 18th Mitchell Trubisky, who was a free agent, and that I've talked about on the show that he was not going to be on the Bears much longer. That's why they were looking for Russell Wilson and others. But the Bills just got Mitchell Trubisky. Got him straight off the waivers, and this makes a lot of sense for fantasy implications because the way that offense works on the Bills is it moves side to side. There's a lot of quarterback rollouts. There's a lot of getting the quarterback in open space. I'm rolling out, and then the receivers run along with the quarterback while he's running out, so then he's in their field of vision. The Bills have good play calling. They have a great organization. They have good coaching, and they have a good offensive line. Top 5 in the NFL. So, Mitchell Trubisky falling back behind there isn't that bad of a get. Mitchell Trubisky was hurt most of the time. Yes. I'm not disputing that. But Mitchell Trubisky has a chance to learn from Sean McDermott, who groomed Josh Allen beautifully, who's going to probably groom Mitchell Trubisky good. Matt Nagy, who had a bottom 15 offense, is not going to groom any quarterbacks. He's just a wonky guy who likes to do a lot of crazy plays and a lot of crazy schemes and he never gave Mitchell Trubisky the respect that he kind of wanted. Mitchell Trubisky started out the year 4-0. Still didn't get the respect he wanted because then after a bad week, they just threw Nick Foles right in the middle of a Jaguars game. Nick Foles actually came back to win the game, which was hilarious, but they just never gave Mitchell Trubisky the kind of like when you have a kid and you want to put him on a bike, you need to take the training wheels off. You need to give him the little push. They weren't giving him the little push. They were just keeping the training wheels off him and then saying, oh, no. You shouldn't hop back on the bike. You're going to get hurt, whatever. We have someone else who's more experienced and already knows how to ride the bike. Nick Foles, hop on. They got that wrong. Nick Foles got carried out on a cart against the Vikings because that offensive line isn't the worst, but it's not the best. And now the Bills have a solid foundation of a team. If Josh Allen were to go down, because they do rely on him a lot, 30 to 40 throws a game, this guy is going to come in, Mitchell Trubisky, and at least win you some games. He's going to be the backup like Teddy Bridgewater was on the Saints. You don't want Teddy Bridgewater to start for you. You don't want Mitchell to start for you. Once again, you don't want guys like Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill to start for you. But these are good backups. So at least you know if you have Josh Allen, you could pick up Mitchell Trubisky on a flyer, and he could get you 20 fantasy points. Easy. That's what he did when he was on the Bears when things were clicking. This offense is way better. He has way better offensive weapons. John Brown, Cole Beasley, Gabriel Davis, Stephon Diggs, one of the best top 2 fantasy receivers going into next year. Mitchell Trubisky has the weapons and has the offense to do it. Now, it's up to Sean McDermott to groom him. And I guess Buffalo, that's one of your new quarterbacks. That's a big one. But a bigger signing was the Washington football team signed quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick, who used to be on the Miami Dolphins, who's on a lot of teams actually. He's had a crazy career. He's played like 16 years, 1-year deal, $10 million. Ryan Fitzpatrick has played for the Dolphins, the Bucks, the Jets, the Texans, the Titans, the Bills, the Bengals, and the St. Louis Rams. Yes, let's throw it back to St. Louis when they used to have a football team. Gave everyone a little bit of love, but Miami, he just came off of a pretty solid year. 2,000 yards passing, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. That's the problem with the gunslinger. He's going to sling. He's going to sling rock all day. So he's constantly going to be throwing. He's constantly going to go. Yards per throw, he throws 7 yards per throw. At least 7.8. So that's 8 yards per throw. He's not throwing dink and dunk passes. He's going to be stretching the field. And now he's on the Washington football team. This helps out Terry McLaurin on so many levels. It's not even funny. Terry McLaurin just got some, advocation from Chad Ochocinco yesterday, and he said that Terry McLaurin's going to have a 1,500-yard season. Mark my words. I kind of believe Chad Ochocinco. One, I know he's full of his own stink sometimes, but this guy knows receivers because he is one. He's no dispute. He's one of the best receivers of all time and the best Bengals receiver of all time. This guy also said that he saw Davante Adams. This was like 2-3 years ago. He saw a video of Davante Adams run routes, and he cried. And he said, this guy's the best receiver in the league, / the best also route runner in the league. What happened? Davante Adams scored 18 touchdowns. You couldn't even guard him. Jalen Ramsey had trouble even guarding him in the postseason when the Packers beat them this year. So, he knows about his receivers. Ryan Fitzpatrick has everything he needs. Curtis Samuel just got added to the group. So, he has young receivers. Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin on the other side. It's not like he has Steve Sims and Cam Sims Jr., which are decent receivers, but now those are the backups. Not the backups, but the third strings, and maybe just an outside guy you throw to every once in a while when everyone's guarding Terry. And, did I forget? The top 4 fantasy tight end going into next year, in my opinion, Logan Thomas. Logan Thomas had a great year. He broke out. He was the 5th ranked tight end in fantasy last year. He went on a tear in the latter end of the season. Helped me win a fantasy championship as he scored over 10 points, aka double digits, in 6 out of the last 7 games. He was on a tear as soon as they started figuring out what they're going to do with him. Ron Rivera is a fantasy machine. We love this guy at quarterback because he is not afraid to throw to Christian McCaffrey like he did on the Bucs all the time. He's not afraid to throw to Kelvin Benjamin, not on the Bucs, the Panthers. He's not afraid to throw to Kelvin Benjamin and make him fantasy relevant and feed him all the time. He's not afraid to go to Greg Olsen, make him a fantasy prevalent tight end. This guy likes to go, I'm going to feed the best receiver a lot. I'm going to feed the best tight end if he can catch the ball like Logan Thomas can. I know he's old. We're going to throw it to him a lot. And we already know what Ryan Fitzpatrick does with tight ends. We've seen him with Mike Gesicki, average over 7 yards a catch and 650 yards, which is second amongst tight ends who have at least 10 catches. Mike Gesicki was getting a lot of clout from Ryan Fitzpatrick. Tua would come in and like to sling rock more and just sling it down the field more. Ryan Fitzpatrick's more of I'll throw it between 10 to 20 yards. Tua was like, I'm going to either fling it or I'm just going to throw dump passes because my hip hurts. So that was the reason why Ryan Fitzpatrick didn't thrive more this year. Still, led his team to a 4-3 record. He's going to give you that 8-8 record and make your fantasy team beautiful. This just helps Terry McLaurin. This helps Curtis Samuel. This helps Logan Thomas. And not as much Antonio Gibson because I liked that Antonio Gibson would get the ball a lot because Taylor Heineke or Alex Smith are just afraid to throw deep all the time. Taylor Heineke was more likely to throw it down the field to Logan Thomas. But Alex Smith, for most of the year, comeback player of the year, that guy was I'm going to dump it to my running back. He's been that way since he was on the Chiefs, since he was on the Niners. He just doesn't like to throw deep. He throws intermediate to low routes. So Ryan Fitzpatrick's not going to throw to the running back as much because he's going to see the field more and not be afraid to sling it because he's not afraid of his arm, even though he's going into his 17th year. But Ron Rivera will find a way to give it to Antonio Gibson like he did with Christian McCaffrey. I've been saying since last year, obviously I didn't have a podcast last year in fantasy football, but I've been saying it that this guy loves running backs and Antonio Gibson's going to be the next Christian McCaffrey. Just mark my words. I promise you, I promise you, I promise you. Who's your new quarterback? Texans? It's Tyrod Taylor. You just signed him to a 1-year deal worth up to $12.5 million. Tyrod Taylor, the poor bloke, as they like to say in Britain. This guy can't catch a break. He is probably going to start for Deshaun Watson for the simple fact that Deshaun Watson does not want to play for the Texans. How much crazy of an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend are you, Texans? Let go of this man. Let go of Deshaun Watson. He does not want to be there. You could keep saying, I'll buy you a Ferrari, I'll buy you multiple properties. Just because you say that doesn't mean they want to stay. Some people actually want they want good morals. They want a lot of good things in someone. And the Texans don't have any of those things. They're just a terribly ran organization that shouldn't be dealing with Deshaun Watson because Deshaun Watson is a 10 out of 10 quarterback that should be on a team that's going to use him right, utilize him right, and make him a better fantasy asset. He led the league in passing yards last year, and the Texans stink. The Texans stink. And now we got poor Tyrod Taylor, who's been getting hosed. He was on the Bills, started out 5-0. He's been on a lot of teams, like the Browns too, but he was on the Bills more notably. Started out 5-0. You thought Tyrod Taylor was the truth. They lost like 6 out of their last 7, missed the playoffs, of course, because the Patriots are in their division. Tyrod Taylor then joins the Chargers. Gonna start. It's my time. Let's go. Phillip Rivers is gone. It's Tyrod Taylor time. Then they draft Justin Herbert, and you're like, okay, that's kind of interesting. First week, Chargers lose. Chargers already hit the panic button. It's over. They call the upper ups and say, hey. So Tyrod Taylor's not it, and Justin Herbert might be it. We might as well just take the flyer on him, puncture his lung when you have to do the little shots that you give him in the back. So Tyrod Taylor going into one of the games, week 2, I think it was against the Kansas City Chiefs. He was supposed to go out on the field, but he got a punctured lung by the doctors, the team doctors. They're supposed to be your boys. And they punctured a hole in your lung, so now you have to miss games? And now it's Justin Herbert's time, and then he shines, and of course Tyrod Taylor doesn't get the chance anymore. His light was over. He had no shine. He had all the shine, and then they just took it. They just blew out the candle. So then Tyrod Taylor's now on the Houston Texans, who's probably going to be the starting quarterback next year. If Deshaun Watson doesn't start and Tyrod Taylor starts, mark my words, please mark my words with David Johnson over there. Do not get anybody on the Houston Texans. This is just the worst thing that could happen for the Texans. I don't trust anybody. Tyrod Taylor's never shown that he could be a quarterback. He's made 47 starts for the, like I said, Bills, Browns, and Chargers, but he's just never proven himself to be a guy unless you give him a lot of weapons, like the Bills did at the time. But no, I just don't see it. Just fade anyone on the Houston Texans because it all starts with the quarterback. And if your quarterback's Tyrod Taylor, which it most likely is going to be, fade him. So that's your new quarterback, Houston Texans. I hope you're happy with him. Fantasy people, please fade them. When I say fade, just stay away from them. Just run now. Take off. Just Forrest run. Go Forrest run. New Orleans Saints. Drew Brees just retired from your team. So now who's your quarterback? Jameis Winston. You guys just re-signed on a 1-year deal. $12 million. You believe in him now? You gave him $3 million last year. Now it's time you gave him $12 million. Jameis Winston hasn't had that much play, just for the simple fact that Drew Brees kept playing and they chose Taysom Hill over him. But Taysom Hill can't sling the ball. He can't throw. He's as bad as Tebow when it comes to throwing the ball. He's a great runner, a good competitor, good gadget guy, good winner. But when it comes to, we want the Saints fantasy defense to start going off, we need Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston is the light. That's not going to help Alvin Kamara with the little dump passes because they're going to give it to him, but Jameis Winston throws it deep. May I remind you what he did 2 years ago on the Tampa Bay Bucks when he led the league with 30 touchdowns and also led the league with 30 interceptions. You don't draft Jameis Winston, but Michael Thomas, he's going to go on a deep route to you. Traquan Smith, he's going to go on a deep route to you too. And it's also good that Emmanuel Sanders isn't there for Michael Thomas. So if anything, they're going to force feed Michael Thomas like Jameis Winston did to Mike Evans that year and made him a top 10 fantasy receiver. He's going to give Mike Thomas probably 10 touchdowns next year if Jameis Winston is the starter. As of now, they are reporting that it is going to be a competition between the two going into the offseason. So you just want to keep a close eye into that because Taysom Hill makes Alvin Kamara better. Jameis Winston is going to make pretty much everyone on the Saints offense better. Alvin Kamara just a tiny bit less on the receptions because Jason Winston is not afraid to throw it deep. He really isn't. Most of his passes are deep, and he's just a bad decision maker. I've said on the other episode, this guy stole crab legs from a supermarket. You don't trust that. That's already one, point about his character. He threw 30 picks in a year. He couldn't win a game under a quarterback coach in Bruce Arians, who's a good coach, a really, really good coach, as we could see with Tom Brady. He just needed the right quarterback. But Jameis Winston is a bad decision maker, but he can help Michael Thomas have a great fantasy year, and Traquan Smith, who is a fantasy sleeper now that they got rid of Emmanuel Sanders. So that's your quarterback, New Orleans Saints. Let's move on to the Miami Dolphins quarterback. Who's your new quarterback? Because even though Tua is your quarterback and you got rid of Ryan Fitzpatrick, Tua has had that hip injury. We talked about all his injuries on the show. He's also had injuries with his throwing hands. It's just he's not always available. And the best ability in the world in football, any sport in general, is availability. As long as you're there, you're in the running to get the starting position. So the Miami Dolphins just signed Jacoby Brissett, ex-quarterback of the Colts. I didn't know he was going to go to Miami. I didn't think that that's what they wanted. But Tua has had a dislocated hip and a posterior wall fracture, which is really big because that's the same hip injury that Bo Jackson had, and that ended his career. It wasn't even a thing anymore. So it's going to be tough for Tua because you throw off your hip. Your legs, everything from the bottom is what helps you with velocity, the way the ball goes, the direction the ball goes. You're constantly stomping your foot and moving on that hip. Tua gets hurt. Is probably going to get hurt. I could still get Tua this year in fantasy. I would still fade him until I saw something. I like to wait a week or two until I want to get someone in fantasy. I'm always just the guy who's like, I'm going to get Ryan Tannehill or someone in the 16th round that no one's going to get. And then I'm just going to wait for someone to pop up. Or I'm going to get a rookie quarterback like Trey Lance or Zach Wilson, depending on the place they're in. But Dolphins, your quarterback is Jacoby Brissett. He's your backup quarterback. He started for the Patriots and the Colts. Started 30 games on the Colts, 3 games on the Patriots. He has beaten the Super Bowl Chiefs. Yes, he did beat the Chiefs 13-10 one time when the Chiefs, the same year that the Chiefs went on to win the Super Bowl. So he's proven that the moment's not too big for him. He could slow the pace of a game down because that whole game they were mainly kind of taking it out of his hands, running the ball and just running smart play calling with Frank Reich at the helm, at head coach on the Indianapolis Colts. But now he has Brian Flores, who's a whiz guru. Uses Lynn Bowden, uses Mac Hollins, uses all these guys that aren't there. And now they just added Will Fuller. They added Will Fuller to the mix on the Miami Dolphins. So now Jacoby Brissett has Will Fuller, Devontae Parker, Myles Gaskin, Mike Gesicki, has enough weapons to slow the pace of a game down if Tua needs to come in. They'll be fine. They'll be fine. That just should let you know that if you get anyone on the Dolphins, which I would get Myles Gaskin in the later rounds. But if you have to get someone from the Dolphins, feel a little confident because at least they have a comfortable backup who's at least had 33 starts. That's good. That's really, really good. Some quarterback that could be yours, Seattle. Apparently, you guys want Sam Darnold. Pete Carroll's very high on the USC product. Go figure. Pete Carroll loves USC himself, had to leave because of, hey, I'm a USC fan, all right? He had to leave because they made him leave, all right? It wasn't his fault that he was paying a bunch of college players, but he wants Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold on the Seahawks would be awesome. The fantasy production would be almost the same to what Russell Wilson's doing over there. Sam Darnold's a good quarterback. They just need a better line. But if they were to do the swap, Russell Wilson goes to the Jets, oh, man. They had Keelan Cole. They have Jamison Crowder. They have Corey Davis. Everyone's starting to stack up. But they stacked up on all the receivers for the Jets, so I don't think that they're going to get rid of Sam Darnold. I think they're going to give him this 1 year and say, this is your time, man. You don't mess up, and we'll keep you. You mess up, you're getting traded because everybody wants you except us. But that was an edition of Who's Your New Quarterback. When we come back, we're going to go into this free agency frenzy and don't forget to stick around at the end of the show when I talk about the greatest and biggest fantasy what-ifs and what they could have done in fantasy football. I love doing this, baby, and we'll be back after the break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
We are back here at the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Still Ryan, still here, still ready to talk about more football. Free agency is going crazy. We're going to go over the free agency frenzy that is going around in the NFL. A lot of people are getting signed. This is the time of the year. A lot of people are trying to build their team slowly but surely, get ready for the draft, see what the draft also pulls up for them. But as of now, we're going to talk about all the crazy names that are getting taken off the market. First, AJ Green, longtime Bengals receiver, is now joined the Arizona Cardinals. They closed out a deal, 1 year, worth $8 million. I don't get why the Cardinals are just trying to get really old. I don't like Cliff Kingsbury as a coach at all. The greatest thing about Cliff Kingsbury is that he coached Patrick Mahomes, and that's about it. But I don't like the Cardinals. The Cardinals are just the Cardinals in my opinion. Yes, they did go to the Super Bowl that year, but remember, that was prime Fitz year. The primest of Fitz. And yes, they went with a USC quarterback, so you already knew how that was going to end for them. USC quarterbacks don't particularly win Super Bowls, if we have to refer to Matt Leinart, John David Booty, so on and so forth. But yes, AJ Green is now on the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray has one more weapon. If anything, this just helps Kyler Murray's fantasy stock a lot more, because Kyler Murray has just like unlimited options now. He has D-Hop. Speaking about old people, Larry Fitzgerald, who might come back, AJ Green, Christian Kirk. He has a lot of people. He still has Dan Arnold at tight end. Dan Arnold is young, so he's still a good, viable tight end. I wouldn't pick him up in fantasy. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying Kyler Murray has a lot of options. He still has Kenyon Drake. He has good. Oh, Chase Edmonds, a lot of good pass catching backs. Kyler Murray is one of the best running backs to throw the ball in the league, so he's always going to have that fantasy value. AJ Green adding to the Arizona Cardinals doesn't do much for me, like when it comes to drafting him, because AJ Green is still someone I'm waiting till the end of the draft to see if he's off the waivers, because this guy's just going to either get hurt. I mean, time's not on his favor anymore, so I would kind of just fade AJ Green for the most part. But yeah, AJ Green is now changing up jerseys. He's going to the Arizona Cardinals. Speaking about changing jerseys, John Brown, ex-wide receiver of the Buffalo Bills and ex-wide receiver of the Arizona Cardinals, is now signed to the Oakland Raiders, according to Adam Schefter. John Brown, the deep threat, is now wasting his talent to go to the Oakland Raiders, who have no help in fantasy football whatsoever. I think John Brown is a better Nelson Aguilar, because he takes the top off, except he catches the ball. The problem is he was getting hurt last year. He's getting older. Another thing is time's not on his side. He was getting lower leg injuries, which doesn't help most of the time. So last year, that's why he was, the Bills kind of just faded him too. They're not even worried. They didn't even want to re-sign him. They're like, oh, we have Cole Beasley and Gabriel Davis who are better, even fantasy options than John Brown. John Brown on the Raiders, I still would wait till the 10th round to get him. I'm getting even Jerry Jeudy I'd rather get before John Brown on the Raiders. It's because the way John Gruden works is he plays with the game plan of the game. He doesn't try to force it to a particular person. That's why it's not good in fantasy reasons, just like how they do with Christian McCaffrey or how the Washington football team does with Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin, how they just try to force feed them, and it helps out in fantasy football. John Gruden doesn't give a damn about your fantasy football team. He's just there to take a lot of money from the Raiders and maybe lose a Super Bowl down the line, and that's it. That's all he's there to do. But John Brown on the team helps out Derek Carr's fantasy value if you have to pick him up on a week-to-week basis, because Derek Carr is not the worst weekly pickup if you're in a 12-man league and say you need a flyer, you're starting quarterback like Aaron Rodgers or Dak Prescott, one of these guys gets hurt, and you need a quarterback. Now this helps out Derek Carr. Derek Carr has a better weapon than Nelson Aguilar. He still has Darren Waller, who's 6'6". You can't teach that. And then he has a good running back in Josh Jacobs in the backfield, who's always going to make people want to stack the box on them. Raiders are weird because they're just getting rid of O-linemen, so I don't know what their whole game plan is, but I know that at least that's a good offensive weapon for them, especially in fantasy. But it's helping Derek Carr more than I would rather be hyped on John Brown. Even though he's probably the best receiver on that team, but Henry Ruggs is a younger version than him, so why wouldn't you try to feed him more? So the Seahawks just signed rival tight end of the Los Angeles Rams, Gerald Everett. It's a one-year deal. Gerald Everett, who played for the Rams for the first couple of years of his career. Actually, that's the only team he's played for. He is now going to the NFC West rivals, the Seahawks of Seattle. I don't know why I want to say it like that, but yeah. Gerald Everett is now joining their team. Russell Wilson has a good tight end now. Gerald Everett was the best fantasy tight end for the Rams last season. It was hard because Jared Goff he was the worst. And Jared Goff just doesn't know how to get rid of the ball. He has too many delay of games. If you see the games all the time, his third down percentage is awful. He has the worst decision making when it comes to it because he gets panicked when the pocket starts collapsing on him. He either scrambles or throws an ill-advised pick. So Jared Goff wouldn't help out Gerald Everett's fantasy value as much as, say, a Russell Wilson now. Because Gerald Everett is a perfect sideline to sideline guy. That's where he gets most of his play. So you have Russell Wilson, who's a natural born improviser. He's going to be scrambling all over the place. He has Gerald Everett open. Gerald Everett is an interesting guy. You should get him in, if you're going to get him at least past the 11th, 12th round. But this does help Russell Wilson. Gives him another tight end. He hasn't had a really good tight end. His best ones are Hollister and Will Dissly, but Will Dissly was hurt. Hollister was hurt. He has no one that's consistent at the tight end position. DK's dropping balls and catching or dropping end zone touchdowns while it's hitting his face mask. We got Tyler Lockett, who hurts his leg every other week, so then he can't play all the time at 100%, so then he's getting locked up. You're going against the Rams. You're going against some stout defenses in the NFC West. You can't just No. You can't just have just one or two weapons that are going to be unreliable. Gerald Everett's going to help Russell Wilson out. Gerald Everett's interesting. I would say he's a fantasy sleeper when it comes to tight end, but when it comes to me, I still wouldn't get him. I wouldn't get him personally, but if you are a Seahawks fan, you should probably be hyped because this is a good offensive weapon. I don't know how it helps out with their real life implications, We're talking about fantasy NFL. NFL and fantasy are linked together, but we're more the fantasy side of it. So we'll see how the Seahawks do in real life. I don't think it'll be too good. But Russell Wilson is a great fantasy quarterback. Emmanuel Sanders just signed with the Buffalo Bills. He just took John Brown's position, basically. As soon as I was getting hyped on Gabriel Davis at being the number 2 and being a stout number 2 because they love Gabriel Davis, he could really take the top off, and he has 300-yard games last year. Gabriel Davis has everything and more than what it takes to be a great fantasy option because Josh Allen's going to feed absolutely everyone. He's going to throw 30 to 40 times a game. Stephon Diggs is going to warrant all that attention. Cole Beasley has now put himself on the map, especially having a 1,000-yard season this past year. One of the better fantasy seasons, too, out of all the Buffalo Bills. The second best fantasy receiver on the Bills because Stephon Diggs was crazy. John Brown was hurt. Gabriel Davies came in, stepped up. It was his rookie year. This is the guy's second year now. He's now acclimated into the offense. He knows the playbook now. He's getting the chemistry with Josh Allen. These are all little things and stuff that you gain of years of practice. So now they are getting this practice in. He's going to be a little bit better next year. I could see Gabriel Davies being a round 6 or 7 to 10 receiver. That's where you should get him. If you're like in a 10-man league, 6 to 10 is a good spot. Because Gabriel Davies has a lot of upside in one of the most high-powered offenses. Now adding Emmanuel Sanders, it's easy to say that they have the best receiving core. The Buffalo Bills did it smart. They drafted Josh Allen. They built an offensive line around him. They somehow quarterback guru'd him because his accuracy wasn't as good, but they fixed his throwing mechanics and they fixed the way he throws with his legs. So now he's able to throw more accurate. His QBR has been up every single year ever since he's been under Sean McDermott. Then they surround him with these weapons now. They gave him Stephon Diggs last year. They got Gabriel Davies in the draft. Cole Beasley for a couple years, but Cole Beasley's always been a dependable receiver. Talent was just wasted on the Dallas Cowboys. That's all it was. They added Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary's not the best running back, but he's a good pass catching back. So they're doing it the right way. The Buffalo Bills are an organization that are doing it the right way. So if you want to get offensive weapons, especially Stephon Diggs, who's a top 2 fantasy receiver for sure next year, along with Gabriel Davies being a later round receiver, but he's a good pick. Emmanuel Sanders, he's old, but I am really interested to see what he's going to do. Because this guy always knows how to ball. He was on the Broncos, balled, won a Super Bowl. He was on the Steelers. Oh, that's when he was a young lad, balled. And then he went to the Saints, still balled. He puts up consistent numbers. If you're in a PPR league, he puts up anywhere from 10. He averaged 11 fantasy points per game, but he puts anywhere from pretty much 10 to 20 points a game. He would never do you dirty, especially with the drama queen Michael Thomas on the other side. But yeah, Emmanuel Sanders, that helps that Bills offense. That helps everyone around. That's a great pickup. Curtis Samuel, ex-Panthers receiver. Yes, ex-Panthers receiver has now joined the Washington football team on a 3-year deal. He is now joining his ex-colleague and ex-dorm roommate, Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel sounds like a really good duo, especially with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Look, I get it. Ryan Fitzpatrick has played a lot of years. And he's been traded to 9 teams. I think he's played 17 years. And he's never won a playoff game. He's never really got a chance to, but he's still gotten some chances. And he's never won a playoff game. So that's the reason to be scared in real life about the Washington football team. But fantasy? Oh, this is beautiful. This is so good. Ron Rivera is going to do exactly what the Panthers are doing, but way better. Because Antonio Gibson's not hurt, and he has fresh legs, so he's going to be doing what Christian McCaffrey's been doing. Maybe not to a crazy extent, but to some sort of extent, he's going to still get 15 to 20 points because he's a pass-catching, in between the tackles, great after the contact runner. That's just what he does. Then they have Logan Thomas, who has emerged as a great pass-catching tight end. He's a little old because now he's 29, but still, Logan Thomas is a great pass-catching tight end. I would consider him a top 4 fantasy tight end going into next year. And then they have Terry McLaurin, who, God bless Terry McLaurin, because this guy has had to deal with terrible quarterbacks like Dwayne Haskins and one-legged Alex Smith. I know he was still good, and he won comeback player of the year, and he did. He had a good year. And Taylor Heineke, he had to deal with all these poor guys, just like DeAndre Hopkins had to deal with people in the Houston Texans. Terry McLaurin has so much talent. Fitzmagic is not the best quarterback in the world, but he can put a ball on you. He could definitely slink rock all the way down the field. He's not going to be scared. So he'll give Terry McLaurin those 50-yard bombs. Terry McLaurin and then Curtis Samuel, the gadget guy, the guy they're going to have do jet sweeps on, and he's going to get 20 yards. Or they're going to even put him in the backfield sometimes as probably the backup running back. He does it all. Curtis Samuel is good. He's just as young as Terry McLaurin at 23. These guys are great options in fantasy next year. I would get Terry McLaurin top 3 rounds. Probably with your third pick, Terry McLaurin, because I have a feeling he's good. Oh, he's really good. And you know how I know he's good too? Chad Johnson just the other day said Terry McLaurin's going to have 1,500 yards this year. And you know how I know Chad Johnson knows what he's talking about? Because the year before Davante Adams went off like crazy this year, he said that he cried when he saw Davante Adams' routes. Chad Johnson knows a good receiver when he sees one. Terry McLaurin's going to have a crazy year. It's not like he's talking about a bum, or he's saying John Brown is going to be the best receiver. No, he's saying that Terry McLaurin is going to have a great year, and that makes a lot of sense. So I would keep a big eye on him, especially adding Curtis Samuel. Just adds, you have to spread the field more. You can't just worry about Terry McLaurin like they did in the past. Rob Gronkowski resigned with the Bucks, so they literally got everyone back on a $10 million deal. Rob Gronkowski is a top 10 fantasy tight end. I'd get him in the 10th round. If you could get him in the 10th round, if you're like in a 10-man league, 8-man league, probably like in the 8th or 9th round. If you could get him as a later tight end, that's a better option. But the problem is he's going to be more hit or miss. He's going to be your typical fantasy tight end. So in that sense, you might as well just take a flyer on like Kyle Pitts, who's coming out of Florida, or try to get someone off the waiver wire. So I just see the values the same. You got Gronk off the waiver wire this year in most leagues because people gave up on him. At least people I know got him off the waiver wire. So I know that you could get someone with good value on the waiver wire. Gronk is just there to help win a championship. They have too many weapons on that field. They have to spread out to everyone. There's a lot of drama. There's not a lot of drama. There's no drama, actually. But there's a lot of egos on that team that have to be fulfilled, and you can't just feed one guy in a fantasy-friendly offense. One guy who's going to be in a not-so-fantasy-friendly offense is Corey Davis. Corey Davis just joined the Jets on a 3-year, $37 million deal, according to Adam Schefter. Corey Davis is a great receiver. Not great. He's good going on great, like a B-plus receiver, because he's really good. If you saw what he did on Tennessee Titans this year in PPR, he was a top 15 receiver. Straight out. But it also helped having A.J. Brown on the other side, who's, if anything, better than DK Metcalf. If you have to get the one out of the Ole Miss receivers. Corey Davis is a good receiver, and he's going to be added with Jamison Crowder and I guess Breshad Perryman. No, it's Denzel Mims. That's who it is, Denzel Mimsy. With the guy, I guess they believe in Sam Darnold, which I don't think they do, because I think they're still trying to take calls for Sam Darnold. So Corey Davis on that team I don't know what he's going to be. I just don't like the Jets. I don't like to get fantasy players from terribly ran organizations. And the Jets are probably the worst ran organization in the league with the Houston Texans. And now I'm adding the Bears with that Andy Dalton mess they're doing. Yeah. So I think that Corey Davis signing with the Jets is a great option. And it's going to help out Sam Darnold. Again, that could help him out like Derek Carr with John Brown on a week-to-week basis, where you need a flyer. Sam Darnold has a good matchup. Corey Davis adds to his value because he's going to be a good receiver who's going to get open. He's a great route runner. He's a good third down guy. So, yeah, I just wouldn't personally get him, but Corey Davis is a good receiver. So don't get me wrong. He's going to be gone in fantasy within the top 10 rounds. So it's just not going to be me. Aaron Jones wasted all his potential and wasted A.J. Dillon's whole potential that I thought was going to happen for the Green Bay Packers, and re-signed for a 4-year, $48 million deal. Wow. He could have gotten more in free agency according to Schefter, but he wanted to be in Green Bay. He really wanted to make the deal done. He's still got $12 million a year. He's still one of the highest paid running backs, a top 5 highest paid running back. But Aaron Jones literally just ruined all the fantasy value of the running backs. Because the problem with Aaron Jones is he's not an every down back. And now that they figured out the sauce with A.J. Dillon, they're going to use him more. And if Aaron Jones gets hurt, which he's getting closer and closer to doing just because he's been the main back for a couple years now. And I get he's a young guy, but you're giving him a lot of carries. A.J. Dillon's going to start taking a lot of the grunt work, and I feel like he's going to be a goal line back, so he's going to take away the touchdowns and vulture him a lot. What's good is they did get rid of Jamal Williams, who just signed a deal with the Detroit Lions. And I think that I would honestly rather get Jamal Williams than anyone in the Packers backfield. Just because I know Jared Goff's going to be spaz out and throw it to Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams is an actual good running back. Aaron Jones is a good running back that you could get if you want in the first 2 rounds, but I'd much rather get Travis Kelce, who's going to be more consistent. Or I'd even rather get Josh Jacobs than Aaron Jones. I'd rather get Zeke, Jonathan Taylor. There's just a lot of running backs I'd rather get. I would even think about getting Saquon Barkley over Aaron Jones. And I'm not high on Saquon Barkley at all. Aaron Jones just tampered that backfield because he's just going to be a drama queen all year and then not produce, and then it's just going to be annoying. And I could see it already. And it's just something I'm going to stay away from. The New York Giants think that they're getting better by adding Damonte Booker and adding John Ross from the Bengals. John Ross signed a $2.5 million deal for 1 year. And Damonte Booker, I think he just signed with them. He signed a 2-year deal worth $6 million. Damonte Booker, I'm just saying these names because for sure one of the Giants running backs is going to get hurt because they just always run with like 3 other running backs. They have Wayne Gallman, Saquon Barkley, and now Damonte Booker. But Damonte Booker's somehow going to get in the mix because someone's going to get hurt. And then he's going to vulture fantasy value because that's what he did with Josh Jacobs. That's what he did on the Broncos. And that's what he literally is, a human vulture. And then we have John Ross, who is the fastest man of all time apparently, but can't get a break because he didn't like being on the Bengals. So now he got what he wanted. He's on the New York Giants in the worst division in football. So now he's going to prove himself and beat the Eagles corners or the Cowboys corners, like, as if that's impressive in any way, as if their corners are anything to brag about. John Ross has top end speed, but just because you have the fastest guy in the field doesn't mean you have the best football player. And I know, like, that's not what John Ross is saying, but John Ross is just being ridiculous. Like, he needs to become a better route runner. He needs to do a lot of better, like, he just needs to become a better overall receiver. He needs to gain some weight too. He's too small. He's way too small. And I know there's guys like Deshaun Jackson that do it, but they know how to work on a field. John Ross is track star speed. Doesn't mean he's going to be the best receiver out there. Tech just re-signed with the Niners, 5-year deal worth $27 million. So they paid him a lot of money. He's the highest paid fullback in NFL. So just know they're going to really value the run. If that tells you anything, the Niners are going to value the heck out of the run because I know that Juszczyk's their boy too, and that's why they also wanted to get this deal done. But a big reason is because they know that under that Kyle Shanahan offense, the Shanahanigans, they are going to run the ball. And that's also why they just signed Trent Williams to be the highest paid offensive lineman in NFL history. 6 years, $138 million. I don't know why Trent Williams wants to block for Jimmy G over Patrick Mahomes. Still blows my mind, but whatever, crazier things have happened. That's why Kyle Long is now blocking for Patrick Mahomes. So everyone's just beefing up on their line. They're trying to protect what they got. Kyle Long signed a good deal today. He signed a 1-year deal with the Chiefs. Chiefs just trying to test out the waters and see, hey, maybe he's a right guard. And that's what they need. Maybe they're just going to shuffle all their linemen all over the place. Patrick Mahomes could run all over the place. Just not against the Bucks. But yeah, that was the free agency frenzy and the fantasy implications that go along with it. When we come back, we're going to get into the final segment. The what could have beens. All these quarterbacks that almost went to these teams in these free agencies, all could have been there. But we'll talk about the past what could have beens in fantasy and what those implications would have meant when we come back.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
And we are back to the last part of the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We are going to talk about the biggest what-ifs in fantasy football. Oh, and if you also liked all the stuff I talked about earlier, like the free agency frenzy, Patriots stock rise, or who's your new quarterback, let us know at Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. We have it all. So just let me know. I am Ryan Basulto. You could find me at Ryan Basulto on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter, though. But you could at me at the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast and let me know if there was anybody I missed or anybody you think I'm just being way too loud about, not saying other people, or I'm just not getting the picture. Or maybe you think I don't know anything. Argue with me. Let's know. Let's debate about stuff, because I will never back down. And I have won fantasy football championships, so I am 100% confident about talking about anything that I have to talk about or anything you want to talk about. So, without further ado, we are going to get into the last part of the segment. What ifs? What could have been? Who could have been where? The Dolphins almost had a chance to get Drew Brees. They were both injured at the time, and Drew Brees was on the what was he on? The Saints? He was on the Saints at the time. So they were both hurt, and right now the Saints were a little murky on if they could continue a future with Drew Brees, even though we all saw what Drew Brees did for the next 12 years in 2008. Then they were thinking, okay, Miami's like, maybe we'll just get Damonte Culpepper, the ex-Viking, one of the better Viking quarterbacks of all time. Or we should get Drew Brees, who won a Super Bowl, but we don't know if he's really going to keep getting better or if that was the best you're going to get of Drew Brees. Spoiler alert, that was the best you're going to get of Drew Brees. I think that the Saints were just cursed and Drew Brees doesn't have that much of a clutch factor. Or maybe I'm just being a hater. I've just never been a big fan of the Aints. Alvin Kamara's great. Michael Thomas was great until he acted like a diva and ruined everything. But the Dolphins definitely messed up. They got Damonte Culpepper. In 2008, Drew Brees threw for 5,000 yards, 34 touchdowns, and that led the league in both categories. Oh my goodness, with a QBR rating of 109.6, or that's his rate, 109.6, but his QBR is 82.0, which all are things that led in the NFL at the time. He threw for 413 times, 635 attempts. Drew Brees was balling in 2008. It's almost as if the Dolphins only got a 1-3 record for 929 yards and 3 interceptions from Damonte Culpepper. The poor guys, man. Like, they didn't have a chance. They just didn't have a chance. Drew Brees could have been a Dolphin, could have been doing way better in Miami because the Saints are cursed. Not Drew Brees. The Saints are cursed. It's not his fault that the Saints lost to Stephon Diggs, Mclaren, and to the Eagles. All just off flukes. It's nothing they could do about it. It's just, hey, man, when you're cursed, you're cursed. Those are real things. Damonte Culpepper being on the Miami Dolphins instead of Drew Brees is a big what if in fantasy. What if the Saints weren't even as good as they just end up being? What if they don't even end up building on this franchise and they just digress back to the old 70s New Orleans Saints before Archie Manning? Even with Archie Manning, the Saints stink. They were one of the first people to put the bags over their heads in the fans. In the stadiums, the fans were just putting bags over their heads. The Saints, no. That was a big what if. That's crazy. And it's crazy to think that they chose a guy who only threw 9 touchdowns in a year compared to 34. When you look at both now, where's Damonte Culpepper? Where's Drew Brees? That is a big what if. But I don't know if it's a bigger what if. Then what if RG3, Robert Griffin III, stayed healthy for the Washington? They had a different name at the time, but now the Washington football team. He was lights out his first year. Remember picking him up on fantasy? This is exactly my point. You can pick up RG3 in fantasy football and nobody knows about him, or you could draft him in like the 10th, 11th round. I've drafted Lamar Jackson in the 11th round in a 10-man draft with during his MVP year. You can get people very late, or if not on the waiver wire, like RG3. He was one of the people I was looking at, but I never ended up getting him because I just thought, I don't know how he's going to do with the Washington football team. But no, he threw for 3,200 yards first year, 20 touchdowns, 5 picks. 5 picks. That's efficiency. That's great decision making, and that's electrifying. 102.38 rating. He rushed for 815 yards, threw for 3,200, rushed for 800, all-purpose 4,000 yards. He rushed for 7 touchdowns. Come on. 7 touchdowns, averaging 21 fantasy points a game. If you could get 21 fantasy points a game from someone who's not going to be a top 9 draft pick, get him. RG3 was electric his rookie year. 317 total fantasy points. That was second in fantasy points in 2012. He played 15 games only, though. Could have played a different game. But running 120 times for 815 yards, 6.8 yards per carry, that sounds like Kyler Murray. And if you want Kyler Murray, of course, you're going to be able to get him later. No, at the time you were able to get RG3 later, but then the next year you weren't able to get him late, so people sold high on him. They got him probably within the first 3 picks. I remember. He still threw for 3,200 yards, still threw for 16 touchdowns, but 12 interceptions. People were starting to figure him out. Running quarterbacks don't last too long in the NFL, so that's why it's good to get them while they're hot. Lamar Jackson is kind of defying it, but I've yet to see it. He's still only done it for 3 years. RG3 in his second year, instead of 815 rushing yards, he had 489. Missed 3 games due to injury. Averaged less yards per carry, rushed for no touchdowns. Instead of 21 fantasy points per game, 16-point fantasy points per game because of his injury. Then let's just keep going. 2014, he had 9.7 fantasy points per game. Then he joined the Browns. He tried to do that, 13 points per game. Then from there, he's just been a backup on the Ravens. If he did not get hurt and he was still producing those 3,200, 20 touchdown and 5 interception games, where he's also rushing for 800 yards, basically just doing what Lamar Jackson's doing, at least, but he threw for 3,000 yards still. Still darn good. So, RG3, if he didn't get hurt, who knows what would happen with the Washington football team. I mean, it's not that late now. He still plays, but he's just never been the same. You saw him when he came out when Lamar Jackson got hurt in one of the playoff games against the Bills. RG3 came out, looked terrible. Got hurt. Then they brought in Trace McSorley, and he looked a little better. RG3 is nothing like the RG3 of old. Let's not forget, RG3 is a former Heisman winner. Yes, Heisman winner. Those don't just grow on trees. And I understand that not all Heisman winners pan out in the NFL, but he still was one of the best college football players at the time. And he beat out Stanford Andrew Luck. He beat out a lot of promising people. He beat out people from USC. Just overall, I think it was Mark Ingram at the time. But RG3 could have been an absolute monster on the Washington football team if he played. Imagine him with Antonio Gibson right now. Imagine the only problem was, and why this is a hard what if, is because, like I said, every time you get a mobile quarterback who's a Lamar Jackson, a Michael Vick, a RG3, they see the film, and since the film's so good in the NFL, and since people are so fast, you're not in college anymore. You're not going to burn these people who aren't going to make it to the NFL. These are the 1%, less than 1% primetime athletes in the world. These guys are going to ball, and they're a lot faster. They're going to catch you. They're a lot stronger. They're going to hurt you. So when they're going to make you pay. And defensive coordinators are more grimy when they're in the NFL, because you'll lose a job just like that if you don't produce. And your house is wherever your football team is. Your family's living there. There's a lot of things on the line. You do not want to lose this. If it means you got to do a dirty play like how Greg Williams did, what the Saints run to win the Super Bowl on Brett Favre, Kurt Warner. If you see that film, oh my goodness. They were massacring these old men. Just put them into retirement. Why don't they? It was the saddest thing you could see, because Brett Favre, you kind of were like, yeah, let's go. But Greg Williams was like, nope, I'm putting bounties on it. I'm giving people a couple $1,000 extra just to take that guy's head off. Greg Williams is still a great defensive coordinator, but that's just a knockoff from him. On the defense, it's just always a tricky situation. So, as I said before, and I will say again, mobile quarterbacks do not work out. Defenses will figure you out. And the film catches up to you. Film always catches up to you. So RG3 wouldn't have lasted maybe till today, but imagine, what if? What if he was with Antonio Gibson? What if he had the security blanket and Logan Thomas? You would be a lot more confident in the Washington football offense as a top 10 fantasy offense than you do with, say, a Ryan Fitzpatrick. That was a big what if. Let's talk about the bigger what if. What if the Bears, under Ryan Pace, who we just talked about, that I guess, great GM, as people like to say, got Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson instead of Mitchell Trubisky. I'm so happy that Patrick Mahomes got the quarterback coach that he deserved, and just a coach in general, the players coach, and a great coach just throughout time. He just had a kryptonite against Bill Belichick, and I guess just Tom Brady just scares the bejeebers out of Andy Reid. But I'm glad that he was there, and I'm glad he didn't have to deal with Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace and the Bears and their terrible kind of line and them not letting Allen Robinson leave. They're just forcing him to stay there and like, no, we'll give you a quarterback. We'll give you Dalton. But the Bears decided to get Mitchell Trubisky in the 2017 draft class. Oh my goodness. I could see where you kind of want Mitchell Trubisky, but oh man. It just fathoms me that those two guys were on the table and that you really went with it. And that's the equivalent to, if you like basketball, the 1985 NBA draft with Michael Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Sam Bowie. First pick, Hakeem Olajuwon, Rockets. They didn't miss. Second pick, Sam Bowie, Portland Trailblazers. They obviously missed. And then third pick, Michael Jordan. We know the rest of the whole story. But imagine if the Bears had taken Mahomes and oh my goodness, man. It may have worked. And what about Deshaun Watson? Huh? What if Deshaun Watson was a Bear? Would have Deshaun Watson thrived as much as he does now? Yeah, he would have. And you know why? Because with the terrible Texans this year, who barely had over 5 wins, they had Deshaun Watson. He still led the league in passing yards with over 4,800 passing yards. Like, the Bears just do not make good decisions. And it's crazy because they've constantly done this over time in the history of the Bearsdom. Like, the Bears. They're missing on every pick. Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes literally has... there's just so many. I can't even just keep naming the stats of Patrick Mahomes because he just has so many. Like, he threw for the most touchdowns in a season. Okay, that's cool. He has the most passing yards through the first 100 games. Cool. He has the most passing touchdowns through the first 100 games. Cool. He also has the best record between over 26 games out of anybody. Cool. He also has, like, come on now. He has a Super Bowl. He has a Super Bowl MVP. He has an MVP. This guy leads the most, like, one of the highest rated offenses of all time. He made Travis Kelce the highest receiving yardage tight end in NFL history this year, over 1,400 yards. Like, this man don't miss. Patrick Mahomes don't miss. But Andy Reid is given some credit because he probably did what he had to do. But you had to already know that Patrick Mahomes was the beast. And Deshaun Watson just won a national championship, so why wouldn't you get him? Why wouldn't you get Deshaun Watson? Dabo Swinney literally came out and said this guy's like the Michael Jordan of college football, or not even college football, of football. He had so much hype around him. Just get him. Who cares? At least you whiffed on a national champion. It's not Jamarcus Russell we're getting. This guy is actually a guy who gets mobile. He knows how to throw. He's accurate. He knows how to go deep. He knows how to go long. His decision-making is great. It's just his team always stink because he's been plagued by a top 3 terrible franchise in the Houston Texans. The Browns were in that list, and they just got jumped by the Houston Texans because the Houston Texans don't want to make the right decision to save their lives. But at least they're not the Bears, and at least they knew Deshaun Watson was going to be good, because I don't get what the whole Bears methodology was thinking, like that Deshaun Watson, a Super Bowl quarterback or a national champion quarterback who beat Alabama, by the way. You're not just beating any college team. You're beating an SEC team out of an ACC conference. You're top school. Yeah, don't ever count you out. Yeah, but you made Clemson relevant again. Deshaun Watson is a unicorn within himself. Like, he's not just no schmo that you could have just passed on. It just didn't make sense to me. And Patrick Mahomes, they already traded Alex Smith or released Alex Smith right away. The Chiefs did. After Patrick Mahomes' first year, they saw him in practice and they're like, whoa, this guy's crazy good. And we're just going to roll with him from now on. Second year, won a Super Bowl, and you know the rest of the legacy of Patrick Mahomes. But I bring that up because You see that. The Chiefs saw that, and they obviously were like, oh, wow, this guy's once in a generation. Bears saw what? Nothing? Another what if. What if Aaron Rodgers went to the Raiders? He almost played for the Raiders because Brett Favre didn't want to leave. He was like, I'm going to stay. From 2005 to 2008, I'm still going to be the quarterback. And the Raiders offered for Rodgers, but the Packers were asking for multiple picks. Ultimately, the Raiders ended up drafting Jamarcus Russell with the number 1 pick, and that did not pan well. We know what Aaron Rodgers does in fantasy football. We know what he does every year. He was had the second most fantasy points in all of fantasy football last year with 382, right behind Josh Allen. He threw for 48 touchdowns, led the league. 4,299 yards, led the league. Rushed for 3 touchdowns. This man is crazy. Only threw for 5 picks. 48 touchdowns to 5 picks. That ratio is insane. That is great. That is great decision-making on Aaron Rodgers' end. And it's typical Raiders, and that is why I always dog the Raiders on the show. That typical Raider nonsense, they always like to fade the smart options. They could have got rid of that pick from Jamarcus Russell, someone else, and got Aaron Rodgers. But no. What did they do? They said, screw it. We're going to get Jamarcus Russell instead of Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is, according to Ryan Clark, who just dropped his little list the other day. The only reason why I like Ryan Clark's ESPN list the other day was because he put Patrick Mahomes at 5, and that's my favorite quarterback of all time. But at 3, he put Aaron Rodgers? I don't think he's 3rd all time. I think he's the same level as Drew Brees, if not as good as Drew Brees. But Aaron Rodgers has that much clout that people think he's that good. So that just shows how legendary of a quarterback he is. And then Jamarcus Russell, okay. Jamarcus Russell would literally lie to the Raiders and say he watched film. And then the Raiders would be like, oh yeah, I remember when this, and this happened? He's like, oh yeah, I remember when this, and this happened. And then they're like, in their mind, they're like, none of that happened. We just lied to you to see if you actually watch film. And you obviously didn't. And Jamarcus Russell got heavily overweight, didn't matter anymore, and went from LSU national champion to what could have been Raider, I guess. But the Raiders could have got their hands on him. And that would have been super, super crazy. Larry Fitzgerald almost left to the Eagles for a 1st round and a 3rd round, but that didn't happen because the Cardinals didn't want to do it. But imagine Larry Fitzgerald on the Eagles from 2008 later. He could have got a ring. He would have stayed with the Eagles because he just stays with bird teams, and that's how the Fitz operates, and he would have been on an Eagle team. He would have been thriving with the Eagles. I would have had some respect for the Eagles. I don't like them because they're the East Coast Raiders to me, but the Eagles, man, would have loved to have the Fitz, who's been a top 10 fantasy receiver throughout the decade. Easy. It was him and AJ Green at the time who were balling a lot, and Calvin Johnson and Larry Fitzgerald. But Larry Fitzgerald, he's just consistent, man. He's never going to drop the ball. He's never going to be hurt, and he's never going to complain, and he's never going to not block because he's not getting the ball. He's not a drama queen. He's everything we want in everyone. He would have been a great fantasy receiver. I feel bad that he's just getting old, and he didn't win that Super Bowl against the Steelers, even though he deserved it. But that was a great pass by Big Ben to Santonio Holmes. I'm bouncing all over the place. I just love the sport of football, and getting me to talk about fantasy football just riles me up, just gets me all jazzed up if I have to keep saying these corny dad terms. But let us know what you think at GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Remember, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Let me know what you think. Let me know, hey, is it me? Am I the one that doesn't know fantasy football? Or do I know too much? And you're catching on to me, and you know that I kind of work behind the scenes for Matthew Berry. Nah, I just wish. I feel like I could do that, but let me know what you think on all those social media outlets. Remember, we are available anywhere podcasts are available. This is the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.GSMC.com. GSMCpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.